Here's how I failed in one of my science tests. Over the past few months, I've gotten a lot of questions from you guys about how I got a 99.95 ATAR. So here are my answers. First up, you gotta practice your Fireboy Water Girl gaming skills. Next question, how long did you study every day? So on school days, I would usually study for 1 to 3 hours, and then on the holidays or during the weekends, I would study around 4 to 6. And obviously at the start of the term when it's not that busy, I would go for the lower end of these ranges and then gradually increase as the term got busier and busier. And just in terms of how I would split up my study, I would usually study for around 1 hour at a time, and then I would take a break because I can't really concentrate more than that. Next question is basically any time management tips because, as mentioned here, and I completely agree, it's very hard to focus after school, especially when you're tired. And I guess the main tip for this is to try and finish as much work as possible during class because you're already in that study environment. Your teacher's there to ask any questions, just hopefully your class isn't too distracting. And this was something that I did to cut down the amount of hours that I would have to study after school when I knew that I would be very tired. And another thing is, if I had to study when I was tired, then I would do something beforehand just to feel a bit more energized, like eat, exercise, or take a shower. I know some people do like to nap, but I personally will probably just not wake up, so that's something that I don't do. What subjects did you do for VCE? So I did English, Chem, Methods Spec, University Maths, and Chinese SOA. For subjects such as Science, Math, and English, would you recommend taking notes using iPad or pen and paper? So for science and maths, I used pen and paper. I think an iPad would help, but it's not something that's necessary. The main thing with taking notes for these subjects is that you constantly make adjustments to your notes. So when I made notes, it's not like I made them and then I never looked at them again. It was something that I constantly added things to, like questions or different explanations. And this is how to make a very effective set of notes. And then for English, I just typed my notes because it was just easier to type long essays on your laptop than writing. So that's why I had all my notes and essays stored in the same place. So just to summarize, I don't think one is better than the other, like typing your notes or handwriting them. It really depends on the subject as well as your personal study habits. And kind of related to the previous question, any note-taking techniques for specific subjects, especially the sciences. So for these sciences especially, it's very important to add questions into your notes. So for example, when I was doing a practice exam, if I found like a question very hard or that I got wrong, then I would write that question into my notebook as well as an explanation. And this basically helps you not make the same mistake next time. And another tip is try and add as many visual elements as possible. It's very hard to remember a set of notes when it's just words, but if you have a lot of visual diagrams, not only does it help you understand, but it helps you memorize the content in a much better way. Favorite and worst subject in school. So actually the same subject, English. I remember in year 8, I actually failed my first English essay. I got like 40 or something. It was like for argument analysis, I believe. And that really motivated me to really spend a lot of time on English. And because I did that, I ended up getting the highest grades out of all my subjects. And so that's how it became my favorite subject. Which uni do you attend to and do you recommend your course? So I go to the University of Melbourne and I study the Bachelor of Biomedicine. In terms of the course, the content can definitely be a bit cooked at times, but the people are very nice and it's a really tight-knit group. And in terms of getting into medicine, because I'm sure a lot of people are interested in that, biomedicine is probably not the most straightforward pathway and it's definitely not the easiest, so there's definitely other things you can do instead. Would you ever consider doing a day in a live video? Potentially. How to English? Well, I'm glad you asked. I recently made a playlist covering how to write each different essay that you'll see on the final exam, as well as some additional tips to improve your writing, so enjoy. Next one, all hail King Julian. It's funny how this one got the most upvotes. But anyways, how would you recommend planning for exams to basically not forget the content that was learnt earlier? So to prevent this, what I would do was I would review all my notes every fortnight, and this was basically just to refresh myself on everything that I've done. And then 2 to 3 weeks before an important test, I would begin doing as many practice questions as possible. And every time I got a question wrong, I would put it in my notebook. And this was the notebook that I reviewed a few days before my test. And for the final end of year exam, I would usually begin my revision around 2 months before the actual date. And this is usually around that final student holiday before the exams. Do you feel like you were able to maintain a reasonable work-life balance in the course of your studies? So a bit of an unexpected answer, but no for the short term, but yes for the long term. Now, what I mean by this is everyone has a limited amount of energy. I could spend that energy evenly and balance out academics, extracurriculars, leadership, etc. But I wouldn't be able to fully make the most out of and excel in one area. And I'm not saying just focus on academics and neglect everything else, because ultimately they do complement each other. So it's not about, 100% this, 0% that. It's more about prioritizing different things at different times. So I always believe that great results come from short-term imbalance, but overall, long-term balance. What, if anything, did you need to sacrifice to achieve this ATAR? Do you have any regrets? So that's a really good question. And I definitely had some things that I sacrificed back then. I definitely don't think this is necessary, and you can definitely work your way around it. So one thing that comes to mind was I wasn't the healthiest person back then. I missed a lot of workouts. So that's something that I would definitely change if I had the chance to go back. And in terms of regrets, the main thing I would say was since I graduated in 2020 when there was the COVID lockdowns, I didn't really get to see my friends that much in person. It was more so online. So that was probably the biggest thing that I do regret. And that's probably honestly why I'm focused much less on academics in university and more on like extracurriculars like socializing, exchange, joining different clubs, etc. So, it works out in the end. What was your study routine like? So I actually have an exact video covering this topic if you're interested, but as a basic overview, I would usually wake up at around 6 each day to go to school because I lived quite far away. And then I would go to school, and after I come back, I would try and study for 1 to 3 hours each day. So that was what a usual weekday looked like. How did you ease stress and anxiety during SAC attack periods? So I definitely experienced that. Short-term fix, I know this sounds a bit wishy-washy, but try and focus on your breathing, like inhale for 10 seconds, exhale for 10 seconds. And I found this really helped me ease my nerves. But the long-term solution, as boring as it sounds, is just to do more practice. So if there was a particular concept that I was dreading, then I would definitely feel a lot stressed before the SAC. But if I did a lot of practice on that beforehand, then that would definitely make me feel more confident walking in. What is the main thing you did that differentiated you from other students? So the main thing is actually 2 things, consistency and efficiency. So in terms of consistency, I made sure that I studied at least 1 hour per day for around 90% of the days. And in terms of efficiency, when I was studying, I made sure that I was in a focused flow state. And the best thing for this that I found is using noise cancelling headphones. Even if you're not listening to anything, it just blocks out everything, which I found extremely helpful when I'm trying to focus. I really want to emphasize the point that I'm not a natural genius or anything. And to prove that, here's how I failed in one of my science tests at uni. And from this little comparison, I can tell for sure that it's just consistency and efficiency that makes the difference. And last question, because my camera's about to die. What is the meaning of life, Julian? So in my opinion, the meaning of life is